Gundam.tk presents Mega Size Age-1 Normal. Hey again everybody, it's Robert184, 2 R's, 2 B's from Gundam.tk, which is GundamReviews.net, and just in case there weren't enough Age-1 Normals kicking around between the AG and the HG, why don't we put together the Mega Size 1/48 scale and see how that stacks up. And barely able to make it onto the turntable, there it is, the completed Mega Size 1/48 scale Age-1 Normal. And I have to say, from looks and proportions, I think they absolutely nailed him. When you put him together, he feels a very light, almost toyish when you put him together. But there's all sorts of little bonuses that I didn't really think about. Because the limbs have very little mobility, and they've got that clicking in them, it's very easy to get them to be symmetrical. Every once in a while with newer master grades, I complain that they just have too many moving parts and it's hard to get everything where you want. With this guy, too few moving parts means it's very easy to get him exactly where you want. And all you have to do is count, like when you're moving the legs, like click, click, and click, click, and you're going to know exactly where it's supposed to be. He's got color applications everywhere you'd expect them to be. You do see a little bit of gray in the knees. The black looks fantastic. That extra little part up in the shoulder is going to look good, as does the gray with the blue there on the fins and on the head. So in terms of looks, I think they nailed it. In terms of mobility, you can pretty much expect him to be what you saw in the parts video. The legs are going to come all the way forward, so you're going to get a nice 90-degree kick there, almost 80 we'll call it. With the side skirts, you're not going to be able to get the beam saber out any more than that, although the hip is going to give you a bend pretty well. You're going to be able to bring the knee forward at just 90 degrees, and as you saw, the ankles can go this far and forward and back. However, with the lack of free moving, in which I mean you have to follow the clicks, you're only going to have 3 positions there for the ankles, and off to the side just 1 and 1, so you're not going to have any gradation. You either have to have it bent like that, or straight on. There's really nothing in between unless you want to try to cheat the polycap on the inside. For the upper body, I can just sort of set him down here, but you're going to be able to rotate all the way, I suppose, as I pop off the spoiler there. That's probably going to get in the way of the arm going all the way around, which you'd expect. The shoulder is going to rotate, and the wrist does rotate actually as well. The elbow is going to give you 90 and nothing more, so don't even expect him to be able to barely reach across his chest, never mind get across to the other arm. And you really do notice that it's you of course have to have the light coming up through here, so it makes sense that it's going to be a stable point, but having those 2 points of articulation is really missing here. I've never built a kit this large before, so I didn't really know what to expect. I built a couple 1/60th and a couple of perfect grades, but here it is next to a 1/144th. It's the advanced grade, and that's with the front of their toes lined up. Yes, he really does look like a toy, barely coming up to the black parts on the knee. And now beside it is the Master Grade 00 Gundam 7 Sword/G, which at 5,500 yen is not that far off from the 8,500 that you have to pay for this Mega Size guy. But he is absolutely tiny, not even coming up to the waist section. He's got a little bit more width thanks to the drives on the side and that massive sword. But he, from a distance, is the one that ends up looking like a toy. It's only once you get up close, or when you actually try to pose him and you just see how many moving parts there are that are going to allow him to fall over and many, many times, that you start to appreciate the differences between the two. And here I have him next to the high grade, and instead of being lined up forward with their toes in line, he's actually back in line with the legs, which just makes him look even smaller. The Master Grade is going to be about the same size as the 00 Gundam, which is still going to be a tiny little thing to compare them here. 1/60th would be nice to have the 1/144th, 1/100th, 1/60th, and 1/48th, but for now, these are the 2 that are going to have to do. For arming this guy up, you can just split apart the hands there, and then you're going to plug this part into the Dod's rifle. It's going to sit in there pretty securely, even up like this, and if you want to plug that right in, you can put it on the Gundam. And you can rotate this part of the forearm around, and you're just going to plug the shield in down there. And as he comes around here in the dark, that's when I realized I might as well keep the lights on, since the light and the batteries are going to be included. Everybody has the ability to light this up. So here it is with full weapons on. It's going to have the shield and the Dod's rifle, which are going to look pretty good. Something I didn't really realize is that the way the shield is naturally, you can plug it in, but it's going to go into the back of the forearm, very similar to the V Gundam, which I always like to make fun of for that. But when you twist it forward, you're actually going to have a slant down there, and it doesn't look unattractive the way it's lined up. Not going to be symmetrical with this arm, but no problems there. The Dodge rifle is the right size, as is the shield. Just again, a little bit disappointing that there aren't a few extra color apps there on the inside. In terms of dynamic posing, don't expect much more than this, because the legs, as I mentioned, the ankles aren't going to move very much, so you're not going to have a lot of options in terms of where you're going to get them. The waist is going to turn, which is pretty good, and that arm is going to allow the beam rifle to move wherever you want it pretty much, but the head is pretty much just locked on there, so he can look down the barrel, but don't expect much more than what you're seeing here, and if you try to fiddle with those legs, you can expect him to topple over. The effect, however, is certainly not all that bad. Everything's proportionate, and he still can look down angrily and menacingly when called upon. With the beam sabers in hand, it's worth noting that the manipulators, when you pop them out, they're going to have some pretty good suction there to that polycap that's holding them in at the wrist. And so far, my impression of these beam sabers, compared to some of the things that we're seeing with newer kits, like the Real Grade Freedom having absolutely oversized beam sabers, these ones aren't bad, but they do come across as being just a little bit smaller, so I really should have looked into whether these are identical to what you get with the 1/60th Exia. The daggers look like butter knives just in terms of size, but it is sort of cool. I thought that this trigger figure sticking out would be a little bit detrimental, but it's not actually going to be all that bad. Just sort of looks like he's getting ready, but it would have been nice in some ways to at least have a custom beam saber holding hand. And I didn't expect him to be able to do it, considering that the Master Grade Ground Gundam had trouble doing it, but yes, he can go down on one knee. It's going to look a lot better with the Dodge rifle than it does with the beam rifle, but it's still a suiting way to wrap up this review of the mobile suit mode of the Mega Size model. So why don't you let me know what you think of him in terms of looks, posability? Are the pros outweighing the cons? Well, anyway, everybody, stay tuned for my verdict, where I will have my complete list of all the good and bad things that I can think of, so that you can make a call as to whether or not this guy is something worth taking up a massive amount of shelf space. See you next part, everybody. Thanks for watching. This is pretty much how it feels looking at the 1-to-1 Gundam.